Just bringing them together, and then everyone wins. So I would encourage anyone, and I'm happy to speak to you about it and give you any practical tips. But if you know someone with a small business, law firms work well, but it could be any type of small business. All they have to do really is reach out to a nonprofit and find out what type of work they're doing, and then you reach out to the universities and colleges, and they are very responsive because they want to give their students a good experience. So when you coordinate all three of those, everyone's really happy, everyone's getting a great experience, and you're able to give back a lot and really make a difference for people who are being persecuted. So thank you.
So before we start the next session, I would like to note that even though the examples that we are mentioning in this discussion are pertaining to Vietnam, but I believe that you can find many similarities in other oppressive regimes. And I hope that you can find some relevant and helpful information in the stories that we are about to share with you. Vietnam is a typical totalitarian state. There's no separation of power. Take, for example, the Ministry of Public Security, which is the highest police office in the country. They hold tremendous power over the lives of the people. Not only they have the authority to make arrests and conduct interrogation, they also control the court and the procuracy systems. They manage prisons, and they have great influence on the office of the inspectors as well. So therefore, the religious prisoners of conscience are faced with relenting persecutions and punished in many ways. Oftentimes, they are arbitrarily arrested and held incommunicado for months on end. And they are frequently charged with penal codes that relate to national security, which by law means that they can be denied access to legal consultation during interrogations and a lengthy retrial detention. And these penal codes carry very long sentences, up to life in prison and even capital punishment. As I mentioned, because of Ministry of Public Security control both the court and the procuracy systems. Once arrested, the activist and the religious leader tried, and they will be surely convicted. And the sentence typically already decided even before the trial begins. So they already decide their fate. Because the court system is the court proceeding is so shady, but the government always insists with the world that there's no prisoner of conscience in Vietnam, only convicts who in prison because they break the law. So therefore, once sent to the prison, the religious prisoner of conscience are pressured by prison officials to admit to the charge against them and to accept the conviction, even though they've already been tried and convicted and sentenced by the court of law, quote unquote. The religious prisoner of conscience are subject to arbitrary transfer. They are transferred to prisons very far from their families. People from the north are imprisoned in the south, and people from the south are sent to the north. And because of that makes it very difficult and costly for their family to visit. And as a result, because of the prolonged separation from their loved ones and the unfamiliar climate, that takes a toll on the health and mental and the mental health of the prisoner of conscience. The prisoner of conscience are typically held in secluded sections in prisons. Under very high security. They are kept behind layers and layers of high walls and barbed wires. A few years ago, Amnesty International did a research on prison condition for prisoner of conscience in Vietnam, and they refer to that, they describe that as prison within prison. But not only the religious prisoner of conscience are punished and suffer from inhuman prison conditions and denied adequate medical care, their families are punished too. The spouses and the children are harassed, are threatened, and placed under surveillance. They're subject to social isolations, threat, even violence. So in such harsh environment, what can we do to help the religious prisoner of conscience and their families? The good news is there are several things that we can do to help them. And the encouraging thing is it works. Working together, we can build an effective network of support, and over time we can expand that into a sustainable global campaign for religious prisoner of conscience. And I would like to stop here and let Ms. Tuyết Dinh to speak about her work as well as the Vietnamese Women for Human Rights and the collaboration with VNCAT and VPSOS on how we advocate for religious prisoner of conscience.
Michelle will come up with a live show that will show you some pictures of the work that we do. But I want to highlight the work that if you look at here, the prisoner of conscience that we see, so far we see 5 people here, is all male, right? We do see some female on the outside. The picture that we have a big poster, we do have some female prisoner of conscience. But the majority and most of the time, the person that will be put in prison is the male. And most of the time, they are the religious leaders, like pastors and priests. Priests, of course, don't have like wives, but most of the time, we have the case that the pastor that belong to the Baptist church, they do have family. And especially in Vietnam, like the Hmong and the Idés, and also the Vietnamese pastor, when they've been put in prisons, their family members have been impacted. So as the Vietnamese Women for Human Rights, we dedicate our missions to help women, and also the impact of the relative, the mothers, the sister, the female relative of the prisoner of conscience. So, like Michelle had been mentioned, Vietnam have a way for them to punish the family of prisoner of conscience by send the prisoners far away from their hometown. So they do have prisoner camp around the country. But if the prisoner of conscience is living in the north, they purposely send them all the way to the south and vice versa. So making the family members who need to visit and send the support to the prisoners very, very difficult and very dangerous, especially with the travel and expense to travel across the country and sometimes into the remote regions of the country to visit their family members. So they are, not only we talk about the prisoner of conscience, we also talk about their family, and especially the women in the families. So what we have done is we reach out to the family and help them to apply for emergency assistance through PPSOS programs, that we will be able to help them to apply for funding that they can use in that to hire a lawyer to be able to take that money to pay for travel expense, and sometimes to pay for medical bill that when they stay at home, the police and the security force harass them, persecute them, and sometimes beaten them. And they have to seek for medical assistance, and they have no money for that. So Vietnamese Women for Human Rights be able to work in with VPSOS, connect us to some international organizations to apply for emergency assistance. Another way that we can help to advocate for the prisoner of conscience themselves and their family is to connect them with the international communities. So Vietnamese Women for Human Rights is try to reach out to the regional organizations like Forum Asia. So we can move it on to do we have some flash on here? Or we have some technical difficulty? Is that not shown there on the screen? Okay. So what we would do is Vietnamese Women for Human Rights is the independent CSO. So we not be allowed to operate it in Vietnam officially. So because we not want to belong to the state-sponsored CSO, and that is make it very difficult for us to operate in Vietnam. So most of the time that we will have the meetings via virtual, like Skype. Zoom is not happen, in the early day. So we're using Skype for communication. And one of the ways that we would do it, instead of just isolated and stay in Vietnam and be harassed and persecuted by the government, we reach out to be a part of the Asia or Southeast Asia network. So we apply, and with the help of BPSOS recommendation, we become the first and the only independent CSO part of the membership of Forum Asia, which is a very high reputation organizations in Southeast Asia that connect the CSO with many countries. And with that, we be able to get their help to connect to organizations like Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, to do joint letter. And together, we be able to raise the case of some of the persecutions of the family member belong to Pastor Nguyễn Công Chính or Pastor Nguyễn Trung Tôn, the ones that be able to, when their family members is been sent to prison, at home they alone with the kid, they just want to, have some way of living and do some work in the market to earn a living. But the government and the police always come to the market to harass them. So making people afraid to buy the stuff in the market, and even beating them on their way to prisons, visit their husbands in the prisons. So we be able to connect them and raise the voice with the international community to write the joint letter to the Vietnamese government to advocate and demand the government to stop harassment and stop persecuting the family members and to release them, their family members, the prisoners, into out from the prisons. So with that, we'll be able to show now. We can see some picture now on the light show. It's here you can see our effort for international outreach advocacy. We'll be able to. Okay, we can move to the next slide. Okay. Yeah, here we'll be able to connect with Amnesty International to have a joint letter to the Vietnamese government to stop torture of missing Trần Thị Hồng. You can see the picture of her have been beaten up just right after she had a meeting with the ambassador at large for religions with the US. And after that meeting, the police securities come to her house, drag her to their police station, beaten her up for all days, and then dump her in front of her house, and then they drove away. So the neighbor had to drag her and take her into the house. So after our letters and be able to connect to the international community to raise for her voice, they stopped the harassments. And with our continued advocacy, in 2017, her husband be able to be released from the prisons and be able to exile and settle in the United States since 2017. So that's one of the success stories that we can share, that alone by ourselves, we won't be able to do anything. But to be able to outreach and get the support from the international communities, we'll be able to do, to accomplish our mission to be able to free the prisoner of conscience and be able to get their whole family exiled and be able to live happily and safely in the United States. Another effort that will continue doing to the joint NGO-led cause to release Nguyễn Bắc Truyện. He's still in prison now that you see since 2017. This is the second time he's been in prison for his assistance and his support to help, not just only for the Hòa Hảo Buddhist, but also for other religious communities in Vietnam as well. And it's here you can see that the same poster that you see is there with his face, with now we ask him to free Nguyễn Bắc Truyện. And this is where, here we are with my sister and Chiang. She is my niece, and she is his Daniel friend. She's the one to recruit Daniel into the next Vietnamese next chains. So you can see the long list of international communities to help us, to join with us to the joint letter, and to show the Vietnamese governments that we're not alone. We have the international community with us, and they stand with us to call for the release of the prisoner of conscience. And not just Nguyễn Bắc Truyện. Here's another story of Nguyễn Văn Hóa, and his poster is just falling down. I think that right there, we just put it up here, Nguyễn Văn Hóa. And this is me and Michelle in Geneva 2019. I had the meeting with UN CAT in Geneva to advocate for Nguyễn Văn Hóa. Right before we traveled to Geneva, Michelle received a call from Nguyễn Văn Hóa sister and telling Michelle that in prisons he currently been beaten up and put into the in a place that is just no access to anyone, and we really concerned for his safety. We'll be able to contact ACAT, is another organization in France, also specialized in end of the torture, and they'll be able to write the letters. You can see right there the letter from ACAT with our advocacy with United Nations, UN CAT, that they can stop the harassments and stop the maltreatments of Nguyễn Văn Hóa in prisons. Okay. Okay. And here are some of the meetings that we had with United Nations, Human Rights Committee in Geneva, and during the review of Vietnam on ICCPR in 2019. You can see the logo of BPSOS is the leading organization to organize the press conference in Geneva, so we'll be able to meet with all the press and share with them the true conditions of the human rights violation in Vietnam. Okay, next. And not just only be able to attend those meetings, we also write alternate report for Vietnam from the independent CSO on the status of implementations of the CEDAW Convention to end all forms of discrimination against women. So Vietnam, they also signed the treatment with the United Nations on CEDAW, and every 4 years they have to go through the review. And of course, they always, when they're trying to write up their own report, they always say good things about the Vietnamese government and how well they treat women and everything. But that's not the true story. And we be able to work with BBSOS to submit an alternate report. This is the report from the true people from Vietnam to really show Vietnam still continue violate women's rights, and to show another side of the story, totally opposite with the report from the Vietnamese government. And also we joined with VNCAT to write to reply to the list of issues on the CCPR when they go through the CCPR review. So that's one of the examples that we can say together we can work with international communities to raise the voice for our religious prisoner of conscience and their family, to be able to help to release them sooner and be able to help them to escape the country of Vietnam and be able to settle to the United States or some free country that they can live in dignity and enjoy the freedom of religion. And here is our contact information. We always welcome partnership, and we love to cooperate and working with international community.
Okay, we have a few minutes left for Q&A, and we have some questions come up from one of our panelists. So this is the first, and the panelists will have some questions for other panelists.
Well, I wanted to ask how you involved nonprofits and students and private persons in your advocacy. How were you able to do that?
Let me take that. So we start small, just like we mentioned in the session earlier. We start from families, friends, colleagues, and I guess it's a blessing or a curse for people who work with me, because I recruit my co-workers, my manager, their spouses, their children. They have whatever talent, I use it. So they help me to create flyers, graphic, they help me to spread the words, retweet. They donate to the cause, and some of my co-workers and my managers make monthly donation to support the family of the prisoners of conscience in Vietnam, and one who has to escape to Thailand. So every month they send the money to support them. So that's not small. And word of mouth, and the best way to reach out is networking by going to regional forums, conference. We start at the civil society conference in Asia. We meet a lot of CSO there, and also government officials and other international human rights organizations were there. We need to make connections and we partner. It's not like we ask them to do us favors, but we also help them out. And so this is an example. So we have a partner organization, Feminist Alliance International, based in Norway. And we partner with them at BPSOS to have the booklet, Freedom of Religion or Belief for Everyone, translate from English to Vietnamese. And we call on the different persecuted religious communities in Vietnam to print and to disseminate it. And the Cao Dai, the Hoa Hao, we have the printed like in thousands of booklets and pass it out. Feminist Alliance also sponsored Weber Trip and awarded him the 7th Prize 2020, they put him on the cover of their quarterly magazine. And they ran 7 pages in this magazine, not about him, but also about his wife. Talking about his wife, just like Ruth just said, not only the prisoner get persecuted, the expression of his wife